Hey, friends. Really good seeing you. This is Jonathan, and we were having some discussions the other day about just different people who are feeling stress, especially during this lockdown and isolation. And one of the consistent themes that kept coming back was just the challenge this is for our teachers right now, and all across, not only in the Triangle, but really all across the country and all across the world in different ways. And so I wanted to try to understand a little bit more about how teachers were just feeling, and because some of us just don't understand the different stresses and strains that they're going through. And so I was trying to think about who I could best ask. And so my good friend Jennifer Tuttle came to mind. We call her JT, so that's how I'm familiar with her. But JT was a public school teacher in the Durham Public School System for 15 years, and so grateful for her and her heart and her wisdom. And so I just wanted to pick her brain a little bit so that all of us could get a little bit more insight into what teachers specifically are experiencing and what they're feeling right now, and so that we can all be a little bit more kind and patient and graceful to one another. And so, JT, thanks so much for just taking a few minutes. And I'd love it if you could just, yeah, maybe give us some insight. You're very well positioned to try to say, okay, yeah, here's what I think's going on with teachers. I know you have lots of friends who are still teachers and in that world, but I'd love it if you could share with us just, yeah, maybe what teachers are experiencing right now and what they're feeling in the middle of the pandemic. So,
Yeah, so thank you for asking. So I think that one of the things I think about is the kind of person that becomes a teacher. I think that teachers by nature believe in the potential of human beings to grow and change and progress, and they enter into situations that with students that they, as teachers, that they know will be stressful and not compensated with the level of education that many of them have. They know that. That's not a mystery in our world. But then they step into that and step into the difficult task of teaching young people every day. And so now, they've poured their hearts into that. And so now they're separated from their students. Every teacher I have talked to has said how much they miss their students. I think sometimes there's like a perception of like, oh, it's a break, but these are people who wanted to spend every day of their working life with their students. And so they talk about how much they miss their students. And then now they're delivering instruction virtually. And while I do think delivering instruction virtually can be effective for students, we have to remember that this is a really unique time for the teachers and for the students. None of these teachers went into this school year equipped for virtual instruction. None of these students went into this school year equipped for virtual instruction. So, what that means is that teachers are doing their best and feeling like it's not enough. I think about myself. If I were still in the classroom right now, I would be teaching the unit on three-dimensional geometry that I taught to my sixth graders, and we would be doing volume and surface area. And that unit by nature is very hands-on. Students would have had cubes, they would have had polydrons, they would have had fillable solids. And I would have been so excited for my students that I know are very kinesthetic, hands-on learners to get those hands-on experience, because they have struggled through like fractions, decimals, and percents, those concepts that have way fewer hands-on experiences. And so I would have been excited for that. I would have had students strategically grouped in groups that I think would have made for productive discussion. I would have had a co-teacher in my classroom that helps with modifications for kids with learning disabilities. I would have had additional rigorous work for students that could handle more rigorous work, that work quickly or tend to learn concepts really well. I would have differentiated assignments. And so then you kind of roll that back as to like where we are now. So now, if I were a teacher sitting at home, I would be trying to teach that same content with none of those hands-on tools, because those are tools that schools purchase for teaching in the school. Students don't often have those at home. Students would not be getting their modifications for learning disabilities. I'm not able to strategically group students. And then there are other things at Like some schools now, instead of teaching 5 days a week, they're going to 4 days a week, or they're pre-recording a lesson. And part of teaching is this, it's talking and it's delivery. A huge part of teaching is walking around the classroom and providing students in the moment feedback. I think we forget sometimes that presentation is only a very small part of teaching, that a lot of it is encouragement. I think sometimes we forget that the process of learning is very vulnerable. Students enter in and they don't know things, and that's a very vulnerable thing to not know things. But then that teacher guides them through the process, and it's encouraging them when they struggle. And so that teacher knows they're not going to be able to do that. As a math teacher, I would be having to teach right now without being able to see any of my students' work. Whereas typically I would be walking around a classroom saying, like, you've almost got it. This is just the thing you need to do differently. And so I think what teachers are feeling is not only are they missing students, but they're trying to adapt, but feeling like they're failing, and then feeling really vulnerable that parents are seeing that and thinking, and then fearing, like, do you think this is my best work? Do you think this is my A game? Because I need you to know it's not, but it's the best I can do right now. And then also feeling like they're letting students down. I mean, veteran teachers have a really good pulse on what students should be learning at what rate. And doing that this way, they're not going to. They're just not going, they're not able to get the supports, they're not able to get the feedback, they're not able to have the tools. And so they're not going to progress at the same rate. That doesn't mean we shouldn't try, but I think what we see in a lot of teachers is they're trying, but they're experiencing the frustration, feeling internally like they're failing, hearing families and being really sensitive to families that say how they're overwhelmed with this. Of course they are. Families weren't prepared for this either. And then teachers sort of feel responsible for that, which they're not, but I think internalizing that. So what I see is a lot of people trying to do the very best they can and not feeling good about it. Feeling like, am I part of the problem instead of part of the solution, and wanting to be part of the solution.
Yeah. I have to imagine that a lot of them are really struggling with comparison too, because all of a sudden you've got all these other teachers who all have different skill levels and all different familiarities with technology and are teaching similar subjects. And yeah, I'm sure that's probably, what you think, like a real struggle that's going on right now too.
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, so myself, I live alone. I don't have any children. So I would be able, just in my own home, to devote more time and energy to figuring out the technology and lesson planning and engaging with students. But there are many teachers that are at home with their own children. Some of them are single parents. Some of them have a spouse that is essential personnel, and so they're at home sometimes with young children and feeling that internal war of, do I choose my own kids or do I choose all of my students? Because of course there's that heart tug towards one's own children, but then there's also this, well, I've got 2 or 3 kids, but I teach 110 children. How can I choose 2 or 3, even though they're my own, over 110? How can I choose other people's kids over my own children? That leaves a teacher in a no-win situation, and with lots of comparison in their heart and feeling like they're a failure. There are teachers that are more technologically savvy, and that's great. But then a teacher that maybe isn't, that didn't realize they were going to have to move everything into the technological realm. This isn't a baby step. You weren't afforded steps. They were all kind of thrown in. And so a teacher that had some of those skills, but not as many, has a huge learning curve. And then there are some subjects that just really are disadvantaged in a virtual world. Subjects that depend on kind of the large group experience, things like dance or band or chorus or orchestra. A person can only sit in a bedroom and practice trumpet for so long. That part is intended to be played as part of a larger group, and there are time lags and issues with technology. That's not going to work in terms of this experience. And bless the teachers that are out there trying to make it work, but um, one of the things that makes the arts beautiful is that it's a collective experience. Well, that's really problematic when you don't have that opportunity virtually.
Yeah. Yeah, and it seems like so many teachers um, right now. I think even just in a discussion we were having the other day, I was overhearing you talk about something where they're all becoming first year teachers again. It's like everybody's having to redevelop curriculum on the fly. Like if you're used to having, here's my curriculum, here's how I do it, but how difficult that first year or two of teaching is for people because you're developing all new curriculum. And then not only that, where we think, oh, well, look, the kids aren't even getting tested, but then they're carrying this guilt of, well, what does that mean for my kids next year? And where's that put them? Right? Because I mean, they're not just carrying the pressure of their own evaluative performance because they actually do care about these kids and them not getting behind either.
Right. Yeah, I think so much of what teachers are doing right now is uncharted territory that makes a teacher feel like a first year teacher, which is full of insecurity and lack of confidence. And there are so many things that teachers, of course, want to do well, but now in the virtual world, how do you do them? For example, if a student is struggling, how do I contact a parent without making that parent feel like I'm implicating them? Because the child is sitting in their house. And how do I have that conversation in a sensitive and compassionate way of, oh, I'm not trying to implicate the parent with a parent that already feels overwhelmed? And so then as a teacher, do I not reach out? Is that the right thing to do, to not reach out to a parent about a concern? With a student, we would never say that the right thing to do when you have a concern about a student's learning is to not contact their parents. So, what do you do? And so, I think those are things that there aren't clear cut answers to. And so, I think, like all of us, they're kind of fumbling through the dark trying to figure out what the best thing is to do. Yeah.
Well, it's because of all those different kinds of reasons that we wanted to figure out a way to try to honor teachers and to try to love on teachers because I think right now, everybody's carrying unique stress. Everyone's stressed. Everyone's carrying all sorts of different anxiety. It's just different for everybody and the different ways that they carry that. And teachers are carrying a unique one. And so we wanted to honor them. But I was hoping too that we could wrap up just by giving you a chance to say, hey, if you had a message for teachers, for your teacher friends, if you had a chance to sit down across the couch from each of them and say, hey, I want to look you in the eye and I want to tell you something from the heart of our community. What's that you'd want to share?
I think what I would say is that the pressure, I want to acknowledge that the pressure feels enormous, that we see them and we hear them in that way. And that one thing that I'm sensitive to is that the pressure won't go away next year. You know, next year there will be pressure to um, regain the lost information from the end of this school year. And that we see that, we hear it, but that they are enough and that their heart for students is what is carrying us through right now. And it has always carried us through. And I think sometimes that is harder to see, but it is a really beautiful thing that against every single obstacle and having no preparation and no training, and then on the backside trying to compensate for the lost learning that is inevitably going to happen this year, they're still doing it, and that we appreciate it. And it's their hearts for kids and their willingness to dig in and feel around in the dark and try to figure it out that we appreciate and will continue to appreciate.
Yeah,
It is
absolutely.
a noble profession.
100%. Well, JT, thanks so much for yeah, just giving us some insight into that and giving us some perspective. And to all of you teachers that are out there, again, we just say thank you and we appreciate you. We love you and so proud of the work that you're doing day in and day out. So you guys take care. Thanks so much.